one of the ways coaches can support our clients is that we can provide tools that help them move forward in life and support their agenda. Two of my favorite tools are standards and boundaries. I kind of consider these almost like sibling tools because they have a lot in common. The big thing they have in common is they both revolve around expectation. So a standard is an expectation I have for myself. I have a standard for different aspects of how I live and how I operate. You know, a person can have standards around how much alcohol they drink. They can have standards for their personal hygiene. They can have a standard for punctuality or the quality of their work, or they can have a standard around the cleanliness or the messiness of their office. Maybe I need to check in. So standards, it's expectations you have for yourself that help you operate at your best. And sometimes standards need to be revisited. And when we revisit a standard, we might find that we have a standard that served us for a long time and now it needs to be adjusted. Maybe we find a standard that worked and now it needs to be kind of decommissioned. Maybe a standard hasn't been employed and we need a new one because we have reached a new level of life or leadership that requires new or even higher standards. So standards are tools. Is a tool. It's an expectation we have for ourselves. And as a coach, you want to support your clients by bringing up the topic of standards. Sometimes just knowing there's this thing called standards is really helpful. This can also just be a topic that you explore maybe early in your coaching, or when your client doesn't have a topic, you can bring up the topic of standards. Or you can hear in what the client is saying as they explore a topic of their own choosing, that what they're really talking about is standard. And you can provide the label, some of the description of a standard, and that can support them in making the proper adjustment. Similar to standards are boundaries. Now, boundaries are expectations we have for other people about how they operate around us or how they treat us. Boundaries, I think, is a much more familiar concept because of the appropriately named book, Boundaries, by Cloud and Townsend. Great book. I encourage you to check that out if you haven't already. But a boundary is this expectation that we have for other people and what we allow around us or to us. And so we can have boundaries around maybe our personal space. That's too close. We can have a boundary around physical touch, like in the workplace, for example. Some people are cool with a hug, other people not so much. And so we want to have an awareness of our boundaries and be able to communicate them. You might have a boundary around the kind of conversation you're willing to engage in or the kinds of activities that you're willing to engage in. I had a client once who had a coworker that loved to gossip. And the coworker would come into my client's office and just start talking down, all the other people in the office. And eventually my client realized, I need a boundary around this. And so he decided, I'm going to create a boundary. And by the way, what's it mean to create a boundary? It means you have to be clear about the boundary and you have to communicate the boundary. Because again, this is expectation for other people. So he communicated the boundary to his coworker and said, you know what, this gossip thing, I don't want to participate in it. I am establishing a boundary of not participating in gossip. And that means not only am I not going to speak gossip, but I don't want to hear it. And so go gossip somewhere else. And as you can imagine, sometimes communicating the boundary is the hard part. But it is a tool that we can use. It's a way of describing our expectations and what we're going to allow or not allow to other people. Of course, you have to communicate them. You have to enforce them and reinforce them, and sometimes reinforce the reinforcement. That's okay. Eventually, people adjust to the boundaries that you establish. So I would encourage you as a coach to think about these tools, standards and boundaries. When have you had a client who could benefit from one or both of them? And where could you maybe use standards and boundaries in your own life? So put the tool into practice for yourself. Let those tools be something that you use with your clients. And I'll bet you're going to provide tremendous value when you do that. Thanks, and we will see you next time.
Be sure and subscribe so you don't miss any of our great content.